Brian, understanding that Marcus had until February 22nd to show up, just what do you make of him missing a couple days at the start of camp?
No big deal. He's a pro. I know he's in a good, state of mind and good shape. Glad he got here today. So, he was here for the physicals too, so he really didn't miss anything. Certainly, you always want people there from the jump, but at the same time, getting to know Stro now since he got here last year, I also know what he knows, what it takes to be ready, and so I got no concerns.
This morning, he also said, "I'm a starter," several times. He said he won't pitch in the bullpen. Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, that's vintage Stro. He's a competitor. He's fought his way through pro ball to being a hell of a starter for quite some time, so as a competitor, he is a starter. I agree with him. He is a starter. So let's just see how everything plays out. 6 weeks of spring training, thereabout, is typically a lot of twists and turns and winding roads before you get to opening day, so let's, we'll deal with opening day when we get there. We certainly hope everybody stays healthy and is pitching to their highest level, but I know that we have a lot of quality pitching in camp, which is a good thing to start with. But how you start is usually not how you finish. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I'm excited that he's back in camp with us.
Technically, he doesn't have to be there till the 22nd. I understand that. But have you ever had a situation like this where a pitcher or catcher didn't show up on that first day?
Well, I've been around for a long time, so I'm going to date myself, but when I was doing the immigration stuff, Pascual Perez, God rest his soul, would always tell us that, his visa wasn't at the consulate when it really was at the consulate. I didn't have to get on the plane. But I remember, my tough boss, George Steinbrenner, was on me every day. Get him in here, get him in here. You just signed him to a free agent contract, and Pascual was like, no visa, no visa. It's like, no, it's there. So I remember Ricky Henderson, God rest his soul, he would take advantage of that basic agreement situation where, again, there's a mandatory date versus the typical report date. So I've been through this. It's not, again, glad he's here. Was excited that he showed up today. He's in great spirits. I did talk to him the other day when he had his physical, so it was good to see him. And, so I'm looking forward to position players to come in next and as we start getting our team ready to go for 25.
Brian, do you take it as him saying, I will not come out of the bullpen for the Yankees, or I see myself as a starting pitcher? Right? Sort of like two different.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get wrapped up in any of that at this stage. I just know that he is a starter, and he's a good starter. And he's just, at the very least, sharing with you that he's a starter, and I don't disagree, he is. So I said, well, we'll just let it play out. I'm not, I don't think I'm not or we're not in a position at this stage to know what our roster is going to look like come opening day. The job is obviously to hope you have the best team you possibly can have and then find the right slots for everybody, so we can contend and defend the American League Championship, the American League Eastern Division title, and find a way to be the best version of ourselves in 2025. But we have a lot of hurdles to get past on a daily basis here while we're working through spring training.
He did say that he was okay going to the bullpen last year, but he's not doing it this year. And you could read into that and think he's trying to get you to trade him, or you can read into it that he's not being a very good team player. You don't look at any of that and just think it's pride for a guy who's had a pretty good career and had to fight for everything he's gotten because he's such a small guy who's proved people wrong.
He's, he's always had pride in what he does. He takes pride in what he does, and he has been a good teammate. He displayed that last year. He's fitting great with our guys, with our crew. He's excited to be back with our guys and our crew, and I think he's just answering his the questions I'm sure posed to him. It wasn't my press conference today; it was his press conference today. I don't know how it was asked, but his response was reaffirming what he is, which is a starting pitcher. And again, just let this whole thing play out. We'll see where we go. There might not even be decisions that have to be made, because, a lot of times these things get made for you. We hope that we'll be in good position and good health with everybody. There's certainly a lot of opportunities that might present themselves along the way throughout the spring. So let's just see where we're at when we obviously are getting closer to opening day, which happens to be late March this year.
How do you think about your team philosophy? Like as a Yankee player, do you want a player to be the team first, mindset rather than the personal preference?
I think that one thing I would say to your question is I want players to be authentic and honest. So they're professionals. They're whether they're playing the infield, the outfield, pitching out of the pen or in the starting rotation. Their job is to perform on the baseball field, but their job also is they've got a pre and post game where interacting with the media and being connected and showing their feelings. You guys bring their talents to life by covering them, and I think ultimately getting the true authentic individual. They should be allowed to have the platform to speak their mind and share what they're thinking. It's not an easy platform to perform in. Most people don't have their jobs covered on a daily basis, with successes and failures or perceptions or opinions, and so I think it's more difficult when you try to corral someone or steer their opinions in the way you want them to be steered. I just think let them speak their mind, let them share their authentic selves. I think you have a better outcome, when that atmosphere is allowed. So you can share your feelings, and you can be your most authentic self and still be a quality teammate at the same time.
Just never say never, but it's unlikely. I'm just wondering, as a guy who constructs rosters, why is that maybe not a viable?
I think that's a decision for Matt Blake and his pitching coaches to determine if that was something, with our personnel, if that's in our best interest or not. It's not a front office decision to dictate to them. It's here's what you've got, and this is what we've developed, acquired, retained, and my job is to provide them with a great roster, and their job is to figure out, where to play them and where to position them. And I certainly hired all these people, so I think we think in like minds. But at the end of the day, if they came knocking on our door and said, Cash, I think a 6-man rotation would be in our benefit because of these following reasons, I'm not opposed to that. So it's really something that they would have to decide upon. So it's harder for me to speak to. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm not advocating for it either. But I do know it's complicated. I remember years ago, that was a conversation. One of our elite starting pitchers was sharing a conversation with another one of our elite starting pitchers. I'm not going to say who and what years it was, but it was years ago. I've been around a long time now, and they wanted to go to a 4-man, and the other one was, no, I'm not doing that down the stretch. And so again, I share that with it. Also, is personnel dependent and buy-in dependent. I think from a manager or coaching staff, you engage your players about their comfort level, about what about a difference, what about a change, whether it's rotation, bullpen, whether it's skipping a start, whether it's a 6-man versus 5-man versus 4-man if you're got off days that allow that to happen, and then you get their feedback, their buy-in or lack thereof. You factor it in, and you make an ultimate call in the end of what is your North Star with all that information. And a manager is to manage people and manage the game and manage all circumstances. And the only way to do that is to know your personnel and then what's viable. And then his job is to pick what's best for us, period, at the end of the day with all that information.
The game has changed a ton. I think back not long ago in the 70s or 4-man and then 5-man, and now you look at there's way more better relievers now. 200 innings is rare now. Complete games are rare now. When you factor in how much better bullpens are, 13-man staffs, which is unheard of back in the day, you see a time in the future when that probably will happen, but you factor in that the innings are going down. There's a lot more better arms coming out of the bullpen. That probably will happen at some point.
Again, I'm not opposed. I'm not advocating. If the people that are hired in these specialty areas start pushing for that with good reasons, then that's that's the course we'll plot.
Do you guys have any injury concerns right now other than Cousins and Beater? Everybody else coming healthy?
I think so. So Cousins, Beater. I think so far so good.
Do you guys have any data one way or another that says a 6-man rotation could help with pitcher health?
I'm sorry?
That a 6-man rotation could help with pitcher health over the years?
I think generally the more recovery time, the better you are. But again, the schedule is your tormentor there, right? If you could play things in a vacuum where you're getting 6 or 7 innings from the starter, that gives you a chance to win, and then you have your bullpen that's consistently well rested, and you can have a rotation of guys that can, then under those circumstances give you the 3 or 2 innings necessarily to secure a win, and then those guys are off, and if you get the fresh arms for the next day, and the next starter gives you the 6 or 7, and that's working nonstop, week in and week out. And yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, but that just doesn't happen. And unfortunately, somebody gets knocked out, early. Your bullpen's got to get gassed to make up the 7 or 8 innings that you don't have from the starter that day because things went awry early, or you got thrown out of the game for arguing balls and strikes, whatever it is, and next thing you know, you're paying for it and playing makeup, and when you're doing a 6-man rotation, clearly it's it's going to come at the expense of the pen because now you've got one less guy in the pen because they're taking the starts. So, again, those are the discussions that get wrapped around it. It's not like I think in Japan where somebody starts and then they can deactivate that guy until he's ready to go take his next start 7 days later, and activate somebody else. And it's just a different world. In 162 games over however 180 plus days, it's a lot of twists and turns that start putting pressure points on things. But those conversations are always worth having regardless, and your personnel and how they feel and how they're capable of handling and not handling, and all those things have to get factored in.
It's been reported by numerous outlets that you are looking to trade Marcus. Are you looking to trade him?
I wouldn't comment on any of the trade stuff that come and go. There's a lot of discussions around things. We're always open-minded to all aspects of the roster, and anybody's welcome to knock on our door, or obviously clearly we have no problem floating weather balloons elsewhere and seeing where it takes us. That's just the nature of the beast. So, but clearly we want to have the best team we possibly can for our fan base as we enter any season and try to fight to become a world champion once again. And so, so those conversations will always continue, and it's always a fluid situation with your roster, with your, obviously American and National League counterparts.
Cash, what's your view on third base? Do you feel like there's realistic upgrades out there?
I think third versus second, I think we have a number of different people that are competing for spots to try to find their way, which, it's probably unusual. Not probably, it is unusual to have every position 100% solidified, or every spot on the roster, pitching, bullpen, starting pitching, bullpen, or position players. It would be very unusual to have that all locked up on paper as you enter the spring before your season starts. So it's always the goal to try to get certainty in all aspects, and then react when you have to when injuries happen. But we've got some people that are going to compete and show us what they got, and then we'll make some decisions when we have to. The Dodgers have raised the bar. They're the defending world champions. They're doing a lot of things really good, which again, I think as a competitor, you're always looking inward of what are we not doing well enough compared to our competitors. I think we do a lot of things extremely well, if not better than most of our competitors. It doesn't mean we're operating perfectly at all aspects, and so our job is to raise our game in if you can't do it in every category, then you got to raise your game in enough categories to get yourself in a position to be the best. And so we're trying to find a way to do that continually and reassess everything we're doing to find a way to navigate all opponents, and hopefully we can find a way in 2025, for instance, to navigate the American League East first and foremost, then the entire American League second, and push ourselves into the World Series. I know they're the odds-on favorite to be there. Doesn't mean they will be, but we'd like to be in a position to take another shot at a title. But I got too much respect for all the teams that we got to go through first before we get there, and we'll see. So, everybody's got to raise their game always on a year in and year out basis. I don't care who it is.
Is it unusual for you not being the number one financial heavyweight in the game? You guys are obviously still up there in terms of payroll for a lot of your tenure. You guys were number one. You guys were always up there.
I don't know. I don't think about that. I never thought about it, before, and I don't think about it now. Like I look at our division. I see the Rays and how they go about it and the rosters they put together and the system they have. I see, obviously what Mike Elias, who's down the street here, has built with his organization as he's taken time and patience to put it together. The Red Sox obviously have done a great job of scouting and developing and being patient. And now obviously have done some major imports with some trades and free agent signs and obviously Toronto on a year in and year out basis, is always predicted to do damage. So, I'm just using the American League East alone. Outside of that, you can speak to where Oakland's now, or Sacramento, is at, and who they are, and what Houston is now remaking themselves in as they've lost some challenging guys but replaced them with quality guys, or Seattle with the pitching they have, which seems to be second to none, or Cleveland and the operation that they've got and how they go about it and the team that they're putting forward and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the Tigers obviously just got baptized into the postseason last year in Kansas City. And so ultimately there's a lot of different ways to climb the mountain. A lot of different ways to peel that onion, and the only thing in the end matters is winning in October and finding a way past. And I think that's the focus. It doesn't matter how you do it, and we have a chance to do it a lot of different ways, via the draft, via signs and free agency, and use our financial might. We have a lot of benefits here that we've been able to take advantage of, and we got to continue to take advantage of, because we don't want anybody to be doing things better than we are, and if they are, then it's our challenge to find a way to navigate that and overcome it.
But what's your thoughts on what he's done? I know no matter what he does, a lot of fans give him grief. YouTube, you guys haven't had a losing season in a million years and come off a pennant, and still a ton of criticism. But what's your thoughts on where he stands contract-wise, what kind of job he does, what the public perceives of him, and going forward?
That's fine.
Yes.
First, I'm never really in a position to say that I want somebody for only 10 years. But I have, just to reframe that, I've been openly saying I've had Joe Torre for over 10, and I've had Joe Girardi over 10, and obviously in the infancy stage of Boone, I certainly hope I can get to at least 10, if not more. You always want to have the guy for as long as you can have, as long as it's warranted and makes enough sense, and they control the room and obviously do a great job. And I think he controls the room and does a great job. We picked up his option last year, but that's not our intent. Our intent is to find an extension, and so certainly I've been working through that, and Hal Steinbrenner has been working through that with Aaron Boone, and we're hopeful at some point sooner than later that we'll be able to officially cement something But obviously it hasn't gotten there yet. But just give us time. Our main focus has been this whole winter has been on roster construction, and some of this other stuff, we're just getting to. But again, our intent is to make sure Aaron Boone is going to continue with the Yankees past the 2025 season.
Guys, I know we started a little bit late, but we're a little past 2 now. Are we in a good spot?
The public metrics that we have access to suggest that you are actually above average defensively, and you've mentioned.
I thought you were going to say we were worse this year than last year, and I'm like, I have nothing to say.
But they suggest you were above average defensively, and you've mentioned the need to improve the defense. Did you actually think that you guys were worse than what the public metrics suggest?
Last year? Mm-hmm. I thought we were bad defensively. We tried to deal with it, but ultimately, again, like you have on a year in and year out basis, certain aspects of your club are stronger than other aspects, and then as the season plays out, you try to certainly work through it if you can, or improve upon it if you can, and ultimately, our work product was able to get us into the World Series, but not win the World Series. So hopefully this version is a little bit different and allows us to get longer, but the competition's also different in fairness to this year's team versus last year's team. So the landscape has clearly changed here, in some areas for the better, some areas for the worse, and in the landscape elsewhere has changed. In the same would go for that. In some areas for the better, teams have gotten better. In some areas, teams have gotten worse. So we just have to see how we navigate all of it, and hopefully we can stay healthy and perform to the best of our abilities. If we can do that, I'll take our chances with the team we got.